Let's talk to Austin Williams, founder of the Future Cities project, because worse than that, worse than all of the water that's leaking into the ground, worse than the water companies charging you the same amount of money for giving you a reduced service, we've now discovered that loads of sewage has been leaked into dozens and dozens of beaches in England and Wales after the heavy rains that came. But yesterday down in Shoreham in Sussex, about 5.5 hours worth of sewage leaked into the sea, and there's pictures of it on Twitter, and it's pretty disgusting stuff. Austin, a very good afternoon to you.
Hi, Mike.
Is there anything that the water companies are doing right?
Well, they're doing some very interesting press releases. They said yesterday that don't worry, because most of those leakages were 97% water, so it's not really a concern for swimmers or for holiday makers on the beaches. You know, so I mean, in some ways there's a truth to that, and in many ways sewage does leak. It's part of the policy of many of these water companies to have overspill into the sea, provided that those pipes go far enough. I remember when I was a child, we used to go fishing off the ends of the sewage pipes because that's where you got the biggest and meatiest fish. But obviously, it's a scandal. It's an absolute scandal that in this day and age, not in my youth, but in this day and age, that we're having to kind of cater with. I mean, infrastructure collapses you talk about every day, you know, across most industries is kind of prevalent, but this one is pretty disgusting. So,
well, it really is, because I mean, as you say, I mean, I remember, I'm old enough to remember when I was young, you know, they had these old Victorian pipes that would go into the sea because they were a hangover really from another age, and we really shouldn't be still doing that. I mean, they've got this big new sewage treatment plant, effectively, I think, running into the Thames now, you know, which at least is a bit of a modern way to do it. Everybody understands that, you know, water will overflow, and when it is as wet as it has been, things will go into the water that you don't want. I remember when I was working up in Scotland, sheep excrement went into the side of a lock because it was very wet, and it contaminated all the water, and it was something they hadn't thought about. You know, they let sheep graze on the side of the hill, but they didn't realise that they would actually poison. I think it was cryptosporidium or something they ended up giving everybody, which was horrible. But you just think that for the amount of money they're making and for the amount of, you know, dividends that they pay out, they should actually do what they're supposed to do, because we're not asking for much. We're just saying, do your bleeding job.
Yeah, I mean, obviously this is a lovely chat over lunch, isn't it? But you mentioned Victorian era. I mean, we weren't talking about us both being that old, but, you know, if you think back to Bazalgette, Joseph Bazalgette, you know, famous character in history 150 years ago, the man who kind of in some ways invented the sewer system. He recognised in the 1850s, London went through what was called the Great Stink, which was, you know, phenomenal. And I mean, the stories of the Houses of Parliament, that was so kind of, well, the smell was so bad that they actually closed those heavy velvet curtains and sprayed them with perfume.
Yes.
So all the plebs outside could suffer it, but the MPs kind of could get away with it. But you know, as a result of that, and many deaths from cholera subsequently, you know, the idea of the sewage network was such a brilliant, innovative infrastructural development. You know, that notion that you have a problem, you come up with a kind of infrastructural solution. That is never on anybody's lips these days, is it? You know, you have a problem. One of the things that they're talking about in water companies now is that we should use less.
Yes.
You know, maybe you should go to the toilet less often.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I mean, I've been hearing from people who've rung in and said things like, oh, yeah, I remember we lived in the 60s, we had one bath a week. Well, you know, we don't need to live like that anymore. You know, it's all very well saying you could live like that. Well, yes, you could, but we have taken quite a lot of time and money to get to the point where we are at in terms of our civilised way of living. I mean, I was in Italy recently, and it's a big sign on the water saying don't drink the tap water. Fair enough, but you know, I don't want to go back to that sort of situation.
No, absolutely. Well, you take a look at some of the statistics now. You know, in the UK, it's 125 litres per person per day is the average. Okay, but obviously people use more or less. They want to bring that down to 85 in the next 5 years. If you look at, you know, someplace like Ghana, it's about 15 litres per person per day, and we've always thought that was a disgrace. And people living in the developing world have to kind of survive on a paltry amount of water or goods or consumer items, and you know, having more cleanliness and next to godliness, the idea of having more, maybe washing more regularly, has always been seen, as far as I'm concerned, maybe it's my Presbyterian background, but it has always been seen as something which is, you know, a social improvement, a social good.
Well, it is. I mean, we should seek to improve our standard of living. I mean, we should not be going backwards. This is what an argument I have with the Net Zero Brigade, who basically want us to stop driving cars and stop flying away on holiday and, you know, use fewer meat products and, you know, eat the grass that you're walking on. I mean, you know, You know, we're not going back to the Stone Age, thanks.
Well, it's not even the Stone Age, is it? I mean, if you look back, again, 100 years ago, when London had horse-drawn carriages, since you mentioned the cars, you know, there was £1 million, if you can imagine the scene, £1 million of horse manure every single day in London, right? And the solution was what? The solution was invent the car.
Yes.
And get rid of the horses, you know, as well as horse corpses and everything. So that idea of like imaginative, innovative, future-orientated thinking is just not on the agenda. Now, I'm not suggesting that there's, you know, novel ways of going to the toilet, but I just think that there needs to be, you know, incinerators. There needs to be, I mean, apart from the fact there should be more treatment works being built on a month-by-month basis for the increased population. Something new needs to be thought about rather than simply, you know, oh my goodness, we have too many water leaks, therefore let's use less water. We have, you know, real problems with the sewage treatment works. Therefore, let's blame climate change and our actions in increasing that. Right. The Welsh Water Authority, by the way, said they've had, you know, such a shock because they've had more rainwater this month than since May.
May.
That was 2 months ago, if you remember, the driest June and July ever. Right. So, you know, I mean, it's such a shock to the system that it actually rained a bit in August showers. But, you know, what can you say?
I know. It really
there's
is
always an excuse.
And I seem to remember back in, just before we had the Olympics, back around about 2010-11, they were digging up all the streets around Southwark, I remember, because Thames Water was saying, oh, we're replacing all the Victorian pipes because it's time. And everyone went, oh, OK, then, well, that's good. Well, that will mean they won't be leaking any more water. Well, it doesn't seem to have worked, whatever it is that they did.
Yeah, no, the leaks are the last thing on the agenda. And very often when they dig down, they normally crack a pipe on the way down. But, I mean, it's actually, I don't know why it is necessarily that it's hit the headlines now, because it's been happening for a long, long time. I mean, even Ken Livingstone, when he was mayor, used to complain that we should fix the leaks more than actually increase the water rates. Yeah. But the government has suggested £7 billion investment, which seems like a drop in the ocean, if you excuse the expression. Yeah. But it's 350,000 sewage spills happened last year. So, I mean, not that that's a proud boast that we're maintaining.
But nobody got very worked up about it, did they?
Yeah. But, I think many people went to hospital. Yeah. But maybe it was lockdown. I mean, people had fewer things to do. You know, they went to the toilet more often. I don't know. But it's more the fact that there's a significant structural problem and a strategic problem about what we do about it.
And what's your view, finally, Austin? In my sort of time, I never thought I'd ever say this, but I'm beginning to wonder whether we should come up with some form of a new version of nationalisation, not a sort of 1970s where it's really awful and run by the unions, but some form of kind of blended ownership of our resources. You know, the water, the electricity, the power, the energy companies. You know.
Well, I think that there's something to be said for it, in as much as the problem is so significant that I don't think private investors or companies have the wherewithal or the funding or the reliability to actually do something. So the idea that you have to have some kind of mass investment by government, and they seem to be spending left, right, and centre anyway, that's something about, like I say, a strategic national plan about what it is that you're going to do about mains infrastructure. Yeah. Maybe even bringing reservoir water from the north where it rains a lot down to the south. That's been discussed for 25 years. Right. You know, a national grid of water, but it's never actually come about. So I do think that nationalisation per se doesn't really change anything. If you remember back to the Nationalised Rail Service, it was pretty dire.
It was bad, yeah.
But there needs to be some kind of political force rather than just leading up to the kind of whims of capitalism, I suppose.
Yes. No, I think you're absolutely right. Austin, good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed. Founder of the Future Cities Project, talking there about the need for infrastructure renewal. It has to be done. Surely there must be a way that we can somehow find that we can run these businesses better, because they're being run so badly at the moment that they might as well not be running at all. This is TalkTV.